Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am your host, Jeremy Salinas, here to talk to you about a brand new game called Ponzi Scheme from TMG. To help me talk to you about it, I have David with me here today.
Welcome back, everyone. You know what? We've got paper money today.
I know.
I don't think I've played a paper money game since I was a child.
This is a cool game. This is different than most of the style games that we like to play. It's based around the Ponzi scheme. In 1919, Charles Ponzi created a scheme, basically a get-rich-quick scheme, in which he lured investors in order to steal their money. This represents that Ponzi scheme, which is basically robbing Peter every turn to pay Paul back on future turns. In the game, each of the players, now it's a 3 to 6 player game, and it plays in about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how many players you have. Each of the players will be grabbing investments off of the funding board.
Right, and these ones here, there's always a starting 9, right?
There's always starting 9, and they're always organized in a very specific way, from the least amount of money at the top to the middle amount to the bottom amount.
Right.
And anytime a new card is introduced to that board, it gets rearranged to represent that. There's paper money, which is denominations 1 through 20. Each person has a track in front of them, which represents when you'll be paying back the dividends on the investments that you...
timing on when you take a dividend or take a investment, and it sets the timing for when you're going to have to pay.
There is a shield, which will protect your money. The money is kept secret from other players. And then there's 4 types of industries in which you'll be purchasing and collecting through the course of the game. So there is a bit of set collection to the game. Each of these industries, they look a little bit different. And you'll note that they're in this chevron shape.
Yeah.
That is representative of the board areas in which you can buy. So if you're buying your first one, you can only buy from this row. If you're buying your second one, that may be a red tile, which will allow you to buy from the second row, and your third one, which will allow you to buy from the third row.
And that aspect, at first, doesn't seem like much, but boy, does that really come into the strategy of how you play this game, which our first play, it only dawned on us, I think, about halfway through, how that worked with, you know, how you're setting up your opponents and keeping them from doing what they want to do.
The other components in the game are the
leather wallet.
The leather wallet, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
This will be used for trading and secretive trading, which other players in the game.
It's probably the funniest part of the game. You're putting money in there and handing it to someone and trying to make a deal, or maybe not, but it's kind of not a bluffing mechanic, but it feels that way. You're really toying with people psychologically.
Absolutely. So how does the game work? It's actually very simple. The start player, which is represented by the pin, and this pin is important for a very specific aspect of the game, but the starting player will decide which of these funding cards they wish to buy. Now, no one will start with any industry, so you always have to buy from the first row.
Right.
When they buy that card, or they take that card, they will immediately get the large number on the card. That's money that they'll put behind their shield that they'll have to use to pay back dividends later in the game.
Right, and take one of the 4 industry chevrons.
And, yeah, exactly. You'll have to take one of the 4 industry tiles anytime you take a funding card. Now, you can pass during this phase of the game. I don't know why you would, because you'd always need the money to pay back. But anyway, there's 2 other numbers down here. The bottom number is where you're going to put it on your wheel. So in this case, you're going to put this on your 5 portion of your wheel. And the 10 is how much you're going to be paying back every time you have to pay a dividend on this card.
Right.
So basically, at the start of the game when this is purchased, when the dial hits the number 5, you have to pay 10 of that $11 back that you took. And that will go around the table with each player taking 1 industry tile and 1 funding card. Whenever a funding card is taken, a new one gets replaced. And the board, as we said at the very start, will immediately get moved to reflect those numbers. The next thing that happens is when everyone is done taking their tiles.
This is the fun part.
This is the trading portion of the game. Now, trading is really cool. It starts with the first player. The first player takes the billfold, and they take any amount of money that they have behind their shield, and they put it into the wallet. And then they're going to pass this wallet to one of the other opponents at the table. Now, they can only trade with people that have the same type of industry tiles that they have. So, for example, if David has a industry tile in front of him that's the blue one, I can target David as somebody that I wish to trade with. Now, when I trade with them, I put money in here, and say I put $10 in here. I give this to David. When I
Thank you
give
very
it to
much.
David, he has two choices to make. Either he can take that $10 and give me that blue tile, or he can double the money and give me the money back and keep his blue tile.
Right. It really plays with people's minds psychologically. And I will say the first time we played this game, of course, we weren't really sure the dynamics involved in the game.
Yeah.
So the first few times someone gave you money, you're like, I'm not sure what I should do at all.
Yeah.
But then as the game goes on, you really start to get into the groove of like basically giving the right amount of money for them to make a really hard choice.
Right.
Right on the cusp of like, should I sell them that tile?
Right.
Or I don't want to give them this money because I need the money to pay my dividends.
Why would you want to sell tiles, or why do you want to keep tiles? Before we get into the end of the game stuff, tiles are used for two purposes. One, when you have a tile, they allow you to buy up to the next level.
Right.
So you can buy more expensive cards that give you more money in order to pay your dividends back quicker or easier. That they also give you end of the game points for set collection,
Right.
which is what you'll want to do. This is a game of survival too. We didn't mention that. The game actually ends when one of the players can't pay back the dividends.
Yeah,
and we'll get to paying back dividends, but
when any player does that, which could happen
at any
almost
time
immediately.
It
I mean,
could.
really, someone could play very, very poorly and just not know what they're doing, and the game could probably end in the first few rounds.
Sure, absolutely. So once every player has chosen to trade with somebody, either taking a tile from someone or giving them money and getting that money back, the first player marker will get passed. When this marker gets passed, that player that it gets passed to can choose one of these funding cards on the table and remove it from play and immediately replenish that.
Right.
Why do they want to do this? That's because the market can crash. When there are bear cards, now there's two kinds of cards. There are just typical cards, which are funding cards, and then there are bear cards, which show a red bear on them, basically. If there's ever as many bear cards as there are number of players that are playing the game, the market crashes. Two things happen when the market crashes. One, the dial will turn 2 spaces.
Instead of 1.
Now, it's important to note, when the dial moves, there is an arrow right here. When the dial hits any of the cards that were previously at those locations, I would then have to pay dividends on that card and then relocate that card to the new 5 space, wherever that may be. The second thing that happens when the market crashes is that each player has to lose one of their industry tiles in which they have the most of.
Right.
If the market doesn't crash, the wheel will always advance.
Well, the other thing, too, about crashing, it moves twice, but it doesn't skip the investments that you have there. So it'll move once, and then if you have 3 investments and it moves twice, those 3 investments move with it at that point.
Yep.
So then you might have a whole bunch of investments, and you have to pay
You
dividends.
always have to pay your dividends every
there's
turn.
no skipping out on that.
And if I kind of glaze over that, once you pay those dividends, this card doesn't go away.
Right.
You always have to pay these dividends, just like a real Ponzi scheme.
And you don't get any more money from that card.
No.
The $11 is all you'd get, but you have to pay the 10 several times.
Right. And as you can see, as you go up in the industry, the money you can collect is a whole lot more. You're looking at $76 on this one, but your dividends are $136 that you have to pay every time this card comes up.
So the really good cards that we found are the ones where the difference isn't so much. You know, there's some here. For instance, 13 and 10.
Right.
That's not too much of a difference. 76 and 136 is a pretty...
But you're going to have to be taking these cards near the end of the game in order to pay back all the other collection of cards, because this is your only source of income. The only time you get income in the game is when you originally take these funding cards, and also when you get money from people to buy industry tiles from you.
Right.
So once everyone is done, once the market crashes, if it doesn't crash, the wheel turns, and then everyone pays their interest, and then a new round begins.
Right.
And you keep doing this over and over and over, and it gets astronomically harder to pay your stuff.
Oh, yeah. You can very quickly get into a situation where you're like, oh, my gosh, in 2 turns, I'm going to have to pay $180 in dividends, and I have 20.
Yeah. And the game will actually end when one of those players crashes. When they can't pay.
When someone can't
broke.
pay their dividends, that's the end of the game. And basically, if you're standing with some money left You're still in the game.
You got a chance to win.
And then you go to the scoring.
Yeah, so if you bust, and it's very possible for all the players at the table to bust on the same turn, nobody wins the game. However, if you are alive when that player does bust and doesn't have the money, you're in contention, and then it goes on a set collection of the number of tiles that you have, plus the number of money. Now, money isn't just a one-for-one ratio.
No.
There are scales in there. 0 through $25 gives you 1 point. So the point scoring is very low.
The points are very low.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of money, and you still may only get 3 points from like
$75.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the money's not terribly significant. It's all about the industry tiles
that you're able to collect.
and you can score pretty decent points if you have a set or two.
Right. Now, there is a variant in the game. If you choose 2 on your turn instead of doing clandestine trading is what they call it, you can skip that and buy a luxury tile. We didn't mention the luxury tiles, but there's 4 of them, and they just cost flat cash, which you pay back to the bank, but they do give you 1 through 4 victory points depending on what you're buying.
Right.
It's a risky move for sure.
It is very risky. I've never done it.
Yeah.
It's a scary, like, honestly, in my plays, I can't even imagine going, you know what I'm going to do? Spend my money.
Yeah.
You don't. Yeah. You'd have to have a really good amount of cash sitting in front of you, and a long ways from your dividends. One of the things is the timing here. If you can get the right investments with the right numbers for your wheel, you can really set it so that it's deferring those dividends off to the furthest spot. What you don't want to do is pay a dividend and just move that dividend to the next space.
Right.
Because that's killer. Like that would be really rough.
Stock market games aren't my forte. I played Stockpile, and it just didn't sit well with me. This game I really, really like. There's nothing in my collection quite like this. There's a ton of interaction in this game. For the simple fact that every turn you are forced, and really you are forced to try to buy those tiles away, because you need... Going into a round, you really need, near the end of the game, 2 industry tiles to buy from the 3rd row, which gives you that money in order to pay your dividends.
Yeah.
So you're always challenged with, how much money do I give them for that tile in order to buy from the 3rd row? And will that make me go broke if the market crashes? Because if the market crashes, it's going to turn 2 wheels and it's going to pool 2 sets of cards with me. So you're constantly thinking about what you can do, and you're also looking around the board and saying, well, I think it may end in 2 turns because he's looking at paying $200 on the next turnaround.
Yeah, you can kind of look around and see, like, well, he's in trouble. So you could play it safe and really just kind of like you said earlier, survive.
Yeah.
And as long as you survive when someone crashes, then, it's your best guess who's going to win based on the tiles.
And I typically don't like games that can end at any time. This one, on the other hand, I love it.
Well, there's a built-in tension.
Yeah, there's a tension that's built into the game itself that works really well with this style of game.
Yeah. For the most part, I would say it's an abstract game. I'm like you.
Sure.
I'm not a big stock market game fan. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we had an old game called Stocks and Bonds, and I never wanted to play it because it just seemed so horribly dull and drab.
Sure.
This thing is an abstract game at its heart that's built around the concept of the Ponzi scheme.
Right.
But the interaction is where this game really, really shines, because during that clandestine trading, every time you hand this wallet to someone, you're just sitting there with a grin thinking, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
And it's just a lot of fun. That part of the game really makes this thing shine.
Yeah, we don't talk about that enough in some of our reviews. This is a superbly fun game to play, especially with the more players that you have. It's really, really cool. So go check it out. That is Ponzi Scheme. I think I may have misspoke. It is 3 to 5 players, not 3 to 6.
3 to 5.
Go check it out. It's from TMG. Make sure you guys support us on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, please. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and all the other social media aspects that we use. And check back soon for another episode of Man vs. Meeple.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.